Hey, well, it's Huck. And, I would love to give you a tour of the hospital here. Um, but every time I go out of the room, of course, I have to wear a mask. And, and it's kind of difficult to communicate with you through the mask. So I'm in my room. Yes, I am back in the hospital, and today marks the eighth day that I have been back in University Hospitals, Cleveland. I came in a week ago yesterday, Friday morning. Earlier that week, um, I think it was Tuesday. I'm going to lay back here because it's just a little bit more comfortable. I can keep my hand a little more steady. Uh, I had just got over the COVID virus. As you know, those of you who've been, keeping up, I had a double lung transplant October 2nd. They were going to send me home after 12 days, but I had a little setback. Some fluid started accumulating in my right lung. And so just about the day I was going to be discharged, they decided, that had to be addressed. So they gave me, first of all, they drained all that. It took about 2 weeks to resolve that. So instead of getting out of here in 12 days, I got out of here in 26 days. So at the end of October, basically, I went home. And things were going pretty well. I had my friend staying with me. I was getting stronger. Things were progressing nicely until about the week of Thanksgiving. So, I had a good 3 or 4 week run there before things, again, setback number 2. This time I had come down with something called the CMV virus. This really kicked my butt. And I ended up going to the hospital. It took them the better part of a week to figure out what was causing the symptoms I was suffering. And it turned out to be, like a 7 or an 8 week treatment that was required. So I was in the hospital for about 2 weeks. I came home and I continued to take home IV treatments that my friend or I were administering to me at home twice a day, for another 5 weeks. And the day I finally came off of that, and that virus is more or less under control, still to this day has not completely disappeared, I came down with COVID, something that I had avoided, really since the whole pandemic started in the early months of 2020. I had a very mild case, but it still brought me back to the hospital for the better part of a week. And in my situation, with all of the medications that I take and my suppressed immune system, they told me I would probably continue to be contagious for about 3 weeks. So we're well past that point. But if you tested me for COVID right now, I would still test positive. And I'm told that could be the case even months from now. It's not uncommon for folks like me. Which brings me to the current situation. Like I said, a week ago, I came into the hospital on a very early Friday morning. Earlier that week, I started suffering like a little temperature, and I wasn't feeling great. And I think that started like late Tuesday afternoon that week. And Wednesday, I woke up and all day I had a 99 degree fever, 99.2, 99.4. I think at one point it went up all the way to 99.8. And at that point, I called the transplant team. They basically, fevers are something they really worry about. And my normal temperature is like around 97, just under 98. It seems to be typical for me. So, this represented about a 2 degree increase. And of course, they wanted me to come up here. They wanted to see what was going on. And I was reluctant to do it simply because, I'd spent so much time up here and it's expensive. And I just, from the cold food to the fact that I can't watch what I want on TV to just, can't get up and get something to eat when I'm hungry or whatever it is. I just, I thought if there's some way I can self-medicate at home, let's do that. Well, they reluctantly, made some changes to my medications and, told me let's take it by day, but they wanted me to come in for another blood test. And, so I think Thursday I went in Geauga. It was a little closer than Cleveland for me. And I did their blood test and I came back home. And I just continued to feel terrible. And nothing that I did brought my fever down, nothing. And finally, Friday morning, I woke up very early, like 4:30 in the morning. I woke up and my temperature was almost 102. And at that point, I gave in and I called my buddy. He was supposed to start work that day. And so not only did I get him up after he had only had maybe an hour or two of sleep, but he was at my house probably by, 5:30, within the hour. And we made the long trek to Cleveland, hour and a half drive or whatever. And I've been here ever since. This is now Saturday, the 10th. So it's like 8 days later. And what has been going on is I had some kind of a bacterial infection. Again, fortunately, it was not anything that ever impacted my new lungs. I didn't have an infection in my lungs. All of these things that I've had, all of these setbacks, could have caused something very severe. In my case, something, a lung infection. I think one of the things they particularly fear is like a case of pneumonia. But none of that were the case. My lungs have been, relatively clear throughout all of this. I have had a little sinus, but all the CAT scans and X-rays that they've taken, all the blood work that they've taken, indicate that I have some kind of a bacterial infection. But it hasn't impacted my lungs, so that's a good thing. You'll have to excuse me for 1 second. I have to sneeze. Goodness. Okay, we're back. The more troubling thing is they've been treating me with a series of antibiotics, many of them through intravenously. The more troubling thing, and the one that keeps me here in the hospital, has been components of my blood are really low. They look at like parts of my immune system, and my white blood cell count is supposed to have a certain number of units per, like, I don't know what it is, 100 or, and it's been extremely low. And their initial efforts to get my red blood count up and my white blood count up, among a couple of other things, weren't successful, but I was actually seeing a decline. So, for instance, my white blood count when I came in was 0.78. That's less than, 1 unit out of, I think, 1,000 or out of 100 per 100. And they wanted something at a minimum of like, I think they wanted a number somewhere closer to like 7, or at least that would be normal. They, at any rate, 4, 5, something, but something closer to 7. In the subsequent days after they gave me some injections, for instance, and they gave me something called IVGIA or something, I don't know, it's about a 3-hour treatment intravenously that, is supposed to boost your white blood count. And in fact, the next day my count went from 0.78 to like I don't know what it was less, like 0.5, and then it went down to 0.4 the next day. Before it started climbing, so it went up to 0.5, then it went to 0.9, then it went up to 2, I think it's up to 4 now. So if we're real close to the point where I think they want to send me home. The other thing that they've been looking at, like I said, with my red blood cell count. Now, the white blood cells are, of course, the component in your blood that primarily attacks, germs. And a lot of this goes undetected. You don't know what's going on. We're bombarded by all kinds of bacteria and viruses all day long, most of which never seem to affect us at all, and we're just totally unaware of it. And that's, among other things, our white blood cells at work. Other times when we get a more serious infection, sometimes we have to give a little boost to our white blood cells and maybe produce a little bit more. White blood cells, like red blood cells, are produced from your bone marrow. And I know after a few days of frustrating lack of improvement, there was some consideration given to the idea that they may have to take a bone marrow sample, spinal tap, and check my bone marrow and go from there. There are other ways to deal with this that are not real pleasant to deal with. And I was anxious to try to avoid that, or at least save that for a last resort. Fortunately, I'm being seen and treated by a team of doctors, each with their own discipline, and they're all very good. And one of them, who was the primary doctor treating me, with my CMV virus, he was the only one that really wasn't discouraged by all this. He said that some of the treatments that I'd been receiving, that intravenous treatment, for instance, said it takes 4 or 5 days for that to kick in. You shouldn't expect overnight results. And sure enough, he was right. I got those treatments like Monday or something, and it took till like Friday and Saturday before I really started seeing results. At any rate, red blood cells carry blood primarily, from your lungs to every cell in your body. And then they pick up carbon dioxide and other waste from your cells, and they, to where they can be released. Some of it's released back into your body where it's filtered through, your kidneys or whatever, and or your lymph system, and is filtered out, when you go to the bathroom. But primarily, most of it is, a lot of it is carbon dioxide or whatever, that's released in the exchange of gases in your lungs. So my red blood cell count was really low. And while the oxygen content in them was well, in other words, my lungs were working great, what wasn't working great is there just weren't many red blood cells going around. So finally, earlier this week, and I think it was around Tuesday or Wednesday, probably Tuesday, they gave me 2 bags. They gave me basically a blood transfusion. They very rarely give you whole blood. They'll usually give you platelets, or the most common thing they'll give you is red blood cells. But at any rate, and again, that was 2 bags, took about an hour and a half for each. And the difference that I felt after that was night and day. And I mean literally 15 minutes, a half hour after the treatment. I went from being unable to barely walk, with a walker, maybe a couple of 100 feet and get back to my room, to, ready to practically dance. Without a walker, I could walk up and down the length of this ward and go around the little triangle here, the like 200-foot circumference of which, 3 or 4 times. And again, without any help or assistance whatsoever. So anyway, it was a big, enormous difference. And so really the question is, why is my bone marrow not producing, at a higher capacity? Part of it is that I'm taking a lot of medications that are suppressing that system. It's not just the anti-rejection medications, but a few others. So they have spent the last week going over all of that and replacing some of my medications with alternatives. And at any rate, having said all of that, it is a very, I almost without question, unless there's a, unforeseen setback, I'll almost certainly be going home Monday. Unfortunately, one of the things I'm going to have to do when I go home is I'm going to be back on home IVs for a little while. And it's the same medicine that I was being given, an antiviral medication that I was being given to treat the CMV virus. They sent me home when my levels of that virus in my system were about 1,000 or maybe around 1,000 units per, anyway, they wanted that number eventually to reach 0 or even what they call a negative number. And it hasn't reached that. I'm down around 250 or something like that. We're getting close to where we wanted to be. But some of the medications that I was on were suppressing the production of white blood cells. And when they took me off of the IV medication that helped me, like I say, get over that CMV virus and get the numbers down to that low, they switched me over to an oral medication. And that oral medication, which I was taking, quite a bit of, was having a negative effect on my white blood cell production. So while I've been here in the hospital, they've put me back on the IVs, and they're seeing, progress. Like I say, my CMV virus numbers, load, if you will, are continuing to decrease. They would like to send me home with some more home virus treatments. I can't find a good argument against it. I understand what they're saying. It all makes perfect sense. They don't want me to go back to the oral pills until one, this CMV virus is completely licked, and two, my white blood cell count is up to speed, and then they'll have to continue to monitor it. So it's looking like they want me to be back on that for probably at least another several weeks. Probably not 5 weeks like I was the last time. That won't be required, but maybe another couple of weeks. And again, I'm not happy about it, but I can't find a legitimate argument against their thinking. They've changed a couple other medications. They've given me a second anti-rejection drug. It has a couple of significant side effects if you're on it for very long. But among other things, they liked it because it allowed them to remove something else I was taking that was not beneficial to my current condition. And it also had some anti-viral properties that would help in this fight to get that CMV number down or beyond 0. And so I'm taking that. It's called everolimus. So I'm taking a little bit of that, it's a small dosage, along with the tacrolimus, which I've been taking, from the date of my operation. So all in all, that's what's been going on here now for the past 8 days. It is very frustrating. I can't tell you. One of the other frustrating things is that, the costs of all of this. This is going to add to the medical costs down the road, and of course the medicinal costs. I'm trying very hard to pay my pharmaceutical costs, which currently there is no cap. So whatever those bills are, eventually they got to be paid. And and each month has been difficult. When I first got discharged, I think my pharmaceutical bill for October, with the first batch of prescriptions that they gave me when I was released, was like almost $400. And the next month was a little bit better, partly because some of those medications I did not need to renew yet. There were a couple other things that I didn't need to have again, at least at that point. So I think it was about 258, or it was under $300 the second month would have been like for November. December, it shot way up. They made a wholesale changes to my medications and added a couple things. And it was like, I think it ended up being over $500. And I just paid that. That would have been for December. Still got some bills for January. January wasn't quite as bad. Part of that was because I spent a good part of January in the hospital. And so I didn't use a lot of my pills, and so I didn't have to renew a lot of them. But things are going to be different the next time I renew my pills, refill them, because, like I say, they've added a couple of more medications, and some of them aren't cheap. One of them, for instance, is new anti-rejection medication, the low dose of everolimus is about $150 a month. And these are the pharmaceutical bills I'm trying to pay at the end of every month or at the beginning of the next month. These are bills I don't want, if I can help it, lingering. I don't want to put them on credit because they're just going to accumulate. And it's really hard. The medical bills are a completely different story. And they are, now starting to accumulate. Most of the bills I'm receiving now are for services and procedures and tests and doctors that I've seen in, during my lung transplant, or, during my hospitalization for that in October, and some of my maintenance and routine checkups and testings since. And like I said, not all of them have come in. One of them that has come in is about a little over a $2,000 bill. And after meticulously going over everything I paid on, what they would call Part B medical for purposes of Medicare, I'm responsible for paying, the first $4,000 of out-of-pocket expenses for the year. And then once I've paid $4,000 out of pocket for medical expenses, this does not include medicine. Doesn't include any of those pharmaceutical products that I take every month. But like I said, as far as the medical, I'm required to pay $4,000 out of pocket. If it totals that much, my cost, and it did. I've got about a $2,065 bill. I've got another, I think, a $275 bill. I think I've got a couple others that are much smaller. After going over all of my bills for the year, my credit cards, my bank account, and checking with all of my different doctors and everything else, for the year, I had already reached a point where I had paid about $2,400 or so out of pocket. So I'm responsible for paying the remainder of that $4,000, which comes to about $1,570. So that's what I've got to pay. And so I am going to do that probably when I get home in the next week or two. I'm going to pay $1,570 of that $2,000 bill, accompanied by a letter and some documentation to explain that according to my medical records, this is, this completes my responsibility for out-of-pocket expenses for the year 2022. So any additional bills that I've accumulated for that year, including the remainder of that particular bill, I don't know specifically, what becomes of that remainder, whether the hospital absorbs that cost, whether the insurance company, the insurance coverage will maybe pick up some or all of that. I don't know. But at any rate, January 2023 begins a whole new year. And Again, it starts off, a new $4,000 cap. So, unfortunately, those medical expenses, some of those are going to end up going on, you know, credit. And fortunately, I have a couple of credit cards that I don't use. Well, I use them sparingly. And when I do use them, it's for small amounts that I can pay off at the end of the month so I don't ever end up paying interest on them if I can help it. And I try very hard to do that. It's helped me get a decent credit limit. But of course, you can have the greatest credit limit in the world if you can't pay the debt if you actually use it. You know. So I'm going to probably have to put at least a portion of that $1,500, on a 0% interest card, where I'll have about a year pay that down. Anyway, I wouldn't be in the position that I was in, that I am by myself, being able to, claw and scratch and pay all my bills and find ways to stay afloat without putting myself in, real great financial risk. Wouldn't be able to do this at all on my income. There is, as I've noted, I think several times before, there has just been an angel out there. There's been a person just who has, for a very long time now, really since the start of my disability, if not even earlier, when I was dealing with some issues with my mom before she passed away, who has helped me financially. And this person, prefers to kind of remain anonymous and doesn't really want to be thanked for their, sacrifice and generosity. I think of this person constantly, all day long. And one of the real heroes, not just of my life, but, just in the world around us. Because, I wouldn't have been able to even consider getting, the operation that I got, were it not for, his generosity in getting me to the point where I could even consider it. I've been able to pay all my monthly bills. I've been able to repair my car when I've had an issue. And now, like I say, I've been able to find ways to continue to pay my medicine. And I think as I look at it, I think things could come to a situation where I'm going to have to find some alternative funding probably midsummer, if things continue the way they are. I had a little bit of money in the bank that I was kind of saving for emergencies, and I've had to dip into it each month. And but like I say, without the help that I've received, none of this we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. I would have, first of all, I would have lost my house a long time ago. I certainly wouldn't have had this medical procedure done. There's a good chance I might not even be around right now with my COPD having been as bad as it was. So the good news is I am on the mend. I'm feeling really well. I think I've got to be extremely cautious. I'm extremely vulnerable right now. My immune system is even more vulnerable than someone in my situation with a lung transplant normally even would find themselves. So I've got to, I've done a pretty good job, I thought, of isolating myself, but clearly it hasn't been good enough. So I'm going to have to take even maybe more precautions, at least until things stabilize and I'm stronger and these numbers get up there and stabilize. So, those are my goals for now. That and to just continue to work on getting my strength up and, seeing if I can get back to, like I said, I had set high goals for myself and I still intend to meet those goals. So I want to thank everybody for continuing your interest and concern for me. Sorry I haven't posted anything. I've been meaning to do it ever since I was hospitalized, but I didn't want to say anything. Like I said, there was a couple of days earlier in the week, Monday and Tuesday, where for the first time, I was really starting to have some real concerns, wondering whether, for instance, whether or not, I got a great new set of lungs and they're doing terrific and my body isn't up to, the task of, everything else that's required here. And, like I said, so I didn't want to post anything until I had more, an answer one way or the other of where this was going. Fortunately, looks like it's headed in a good direction. So anyway, I will talk to you again real soon. I thank you for watching. You have a great day.